since I've done it, so I figured, why not? So the book that we're reading today is called The Art Spirit, and it's a book by Robert Henry. Let me get closer to you. Here, that's better. And I haven't read all of it yet, but I got through a little bit of it, and it's a really good book. So I'm just going to start reading from the beginning. Okay. So it starts off, Robert Henry, introduction by Forbes Watson. No other American painter drew into himself such a large, ardently personal group of followers as Robert Henry, whose death July 12, 1929, brought to an end a life of uncontaminated devotion to art. Henry was an inspired teacher with an extraordinary gift for verbal communication, with a personality and prophetic fire that transformed pupils into idolaters. Not only so, but he ardently believed in the close relationship of art to life, believed that art is a matter in which not only professionals and students, but everyone is vitally concerned. And his contention is supported by the immense benefit that has accrued to France through its devotion to art and its production. The list of men now eminent who developed under Henry's precepts is a long one. He sought above all things to cultivate spontaneity. He always attempted to bring out the native gift. He gave his followers complete respect for an American outlook. He showed them the Frenchman, but he did not encourage them to imitate the Frenchman. Without Jingo, Henry taught them artistic self-respect. It was not a crime to look at American material with American eyes. Yet, for all the impulsion which he gave toward what might be called a native school, Henry was the first artist to spread in any broad way the news of the great French painters who made the 19th century such a glorious epoch. It is hard for us to realize that only a short generation ago, changes in French art were not registered in New York with anything like the present rate of speed. New York had not then become the great financial center of the world. French paintings were not then bought at such dazzling prices or in anything like the same quantity as now, nor had the collecting of Parisian art, popular as it was more than 10 years ago, become a social mania in America that it is today. Curiously, although William Chase and other prominent American painters and painting teachers who belonged to the period immediately preceding Henry's reign might have brought back from Europe for their future pupils the fresh news of Manet, Degas, and the others, it remained for Henry, the great protagonist of a new American school, to be the first prophet to bring to students in any great numbers both a sense of the importance of the last half of the 19th century in French painting and a knowledge of the revived interest in such old masters as Franz Hals, Goya, and El Greco. To be sure, Chase talked to his students about El Greco before Henry started teaching, and other painters of Chase's generation knew these things, but Henry was a far more dynamic teacher than Chase. It required his extraordinary personal magnetism, his fervor, his passion for the verbal communication of his ideas, to place before a vast succession of eager youth the new world of vision, and to make general knowledge which before had been too special to be effective. No one who has not felt the magnetic power of Henry when he had before him an audience of ambitious students hungry for the master's moving words can appreciate the emotional devotion to art which he could inspire as could no other teacher. as an ideal to imitate. One can hardly believe now, were the facts not so easy to establish, that many of the young men and women who studied under him, although so passionately interested in painting, first heard the names of Daumier, Manet, Degas, Goya, and a host of others from the lips of Robert Henry. One wonders how some of them ever came to painting at all after exhibiting such surprising ability to dodge knowledge. Henry was not on the lookout for cultivation. Native talent, in whatever crude disguise it might appear, was what he sought. Let the untrained student be as naive, as profoundly illiterate, as filled with aesthetic misconceptions as possible. Henry disregarded the outward dress and pointed lack of polish. He looked to the man's potentialities, which he attempted to develop without regard to himself in time and energy. He demanded from his students a first-hand emotion received not from art, but from life. When Henry's classes were at fever heat, Impressionism was already being taught in the Pennsylvania Academy. Twachtman, who died in 1902, had inculcated Impressionist theories of light in his students at the Art Students League. But Twachtman was an unwilling, comparatively inarticulate teacher, capable of communicating only to the views some sense of his rare and subtle spirit. Henry, on the other hand, was, as I have said, an inspired teacher with an extraordinary gift for verbal communication. Henry never showed the slightest interest in the more scientific side of Impressionism. The blonde beauties of sunlit landscapes had no special appeal for him. What he did take from the Impressionists, and what, after all, was perhaps the most valuable contribution made by the group, the only contribution which they all made in common, was the idea of looking at contemporary life and contemporary scenes with a fresh, unprejudiced, unacademic eye. His students followed Henry without complaint, even when they suffered thereby great material hardships. They did not take the slightest compromise with the ideals which Henry held before them. I can still remember sitting on a bench in a Union Square, listening to some Henry students in a heated discussion of what Henry had said that evening to his night school students. The discussion was so ardent that no one hearing it could have believed that these young men, who had worked all day at manual labor and painted for hours at the Henry School, were about to sleep on a bench in a park because they could not afford to hire a room for the night. It is difficult for us to realize today how infinitely more arduous exhibition conditions were then for the young painter. Art had not become news anything like the degree it has since become news. The dealers were not then chasing each other over the face of the earth